The wind on Brooklyn Bridge that night was cold enough to kill. But I didn't care. I was 23, broken, and standing on the wrong side of the railing. Below me, the East River churned black and infinite. The city lights reflected off its surface like scattered diamonds. Beautiful, indifferent, eternal. They would keep shimmering long after I was gone. New York didn't care about one more body in its waters. It had swallowed thousands before me, and would swallow thousands more. I had climbed over the railing 20 minutes ago. My fingers were numb from gripping the cold steel behind me, but I couldn't let go. Not yet. I needed one more minute, one more breath, one more chance to convince myself that this was the only way. My name is Daniel Mercer. At 23, I had already failed at everything that mattered. I had graduated from Columbia Business School 6 months earlier. Top of my class. Offers from Goldman Sachs and McKinsey. The golden boy everyone expected to conquer Wall Street. But 3 months into my job at a prestigious consulting firm, I had a breakdown in the middle of a presentation. Panic attack. Hyperventilation. Security had to carry me out, while 30 partners watched in silence. The diagnosis came a week later. Severe depression, anxiety disorder, possible PTSD from unresolved childhood trauma. The therapist wanted to dig into my past, into the father I never knew, into the mother who raised me with cold efficiency and colder love. I stopped going after 2 sessions. The job was gone. The apartment, a studio in the Upper East Side that cost more than my sanity, was gone. The girlfriend, a fellow MBA named Sarah who had loved my potential more than my person, was gone. She had texted me that morning. "I can't fix you, Daniel. I don't think anyone can." Dreit remender. 70s halv. She was right. No one could fix me. Not the therapists. Not the pills. Not the alcohol I had been drowning in for the past month. I was broken in a way that couldn't be repaired. Damaged by something I couldn't even name. So here I was. Brooklyn Bridge. 2:47 a.m. November 15th. Ready to become another statistic. Another headline that would be forgotten by next week's news cycle. Beautiful night. Isn't it? The voice came from behind me, calm, unhurried, like we were strangers commenting on the weather at a bus stop. I turned my head slightly, keeping my grip on the railing. A homeless man stood about 10 feet away. Gray beard, tangled and unkempt. A coat that might have been green once, but had faded to something between brown and gray. Eyes that caught the distant lights and held them like captured stars. He wasn't looking at the river. He was looking at me. "I'm not in the mood for conversation," I said. My voice came out hoarse, cracked from disuse and desperation. "Neither am I," he replied. He took a step closer, then stopped. "Mind if I just stand here for a while? Gets lonely out here at night." I wanted to tell him to leave. I wanted to scream at him to go away, to let me do this one thing without an audience. But something in his voice, something tired and familiar, made me pause. "Do whatever you want," I muttered. "I won't be here long." He nodded slowly, like I had said something profound. Then he walked to the railing on the safe side and leaned against it, gazing out at the water. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The wind howled between the bridge cables, playing them like a monstrous instrument. The city hummed in the distance, millions of lives continuing without us. "I used to bring my son here," the man said quietly. "When he was little, before everything went wrong." I didn't respond. I didn't care about his son, or his memories. I had my own ghosts to carry. "He loved the lights," he continued. "Used to count them. Said he wanted to put them all in a jar and keep them forever." A pause. "Kids say the strangest things. I didn't have a father," I heard myself say. The words came out before I could stop them, pulled from some deep place I kept locked. "He died when I was 3. Don't remember him at all." The man turned to look at me. In the dim light, his eyes seemed to glisten. "That's a heavy thing to carry," he said. "Growing up without knowing where you came from." I know where I came from. My voice was bitter. I came from a mother who never hugged me, a stepfather who looked at me like I was a stain on his carpet, and a world that promised everything and delivered nothing. And that's why you're standing there? On that side of the railing? I laughed, a harsh, broken sound. You're not going to talk me out of this, old man. I've heard all the speeches. Life is precious. Things will get better. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. I shook my head. You know what? Some problems aren't temporary. Some pain doesn't go away. The man was silent for a moment. Then he did something unexpected. He climbed over the railing, not to push me, not to grab me. He just stood there, beside me, on the wrong side of the barrier. His hands gripped the steel just like mine. His feet balanced on the narrow ledge just like mine. The wind whipped at his ragged coat. What the hell are you doing? I demanded. If you're going to jump, he said calmly, I might as well keep you company. Are you insane? Probably. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw his face clearly. Weathered skin, deep lines carved by years of hardship. But his eyes were the strangest shade of gray-blue, almost silver in the moonlight. They looked familiar somehow. I've been watching this bridge for 15 years, he said. Seen a lot of people climb over this railing. Some of them jumped. Some didn't. He paused. The ones who didn't, they always had the same look. Like they were waiting for permission. Like they needed someone to tell them it was okay to live. I don't need permission from anyone. No, he agreed. You don't. But you also don't need permission to die. He turned to face the water. So, here we are. Two strangers on a bridge. One choice. What happens next is up to you. I stared at him. No one had ever done this before. The therapists had talked at me. The doctors had prescribed at me. My mother had lectured at me. But no one had ever just stood with me. In the darkness. On the edge. Why do you care? I whispered. You don't even know me. The man's grip tightened on the railing. When he spoke, his voice was thick with something I couldn't identify. Maybe I see something in you, he said. Something worth saving. There's nothing worth saving. That's not for you to decide. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and placed his hand on my shoulder. His grip was warm despite the cold. Steady, despite the wind. Not tonight, son. The word echoed in my head like a bell. My father had died when I was 3. I had no memories of him, no photos, no stories. My mother never spoke of him. It was as if he had never existed at all. But in that moment, with a stranger's hand on my shoulder and a stranger's voice calling me son, I felt something crack inside me. Not break, crack. Like ice, beginning to thaw. I don't know how to live, I admitted. The confession came out as a whisper, barely audible above the wind. Neither do I, the man replied. But we figure it out, one day at a time, one breath at a time. He nodded toward the safe side of the railing. What do you say? Want to figure it out together? Just for tonight? I looked at the water one last time. It was still black, still infinite, still waiting. But for the first time in months, it didn't call to me. I climbed back over the railing. The man followed, moving with surprising agility for his age. When we were both on the safe side, he let out a long breath, like he had been holding it for hours. There's a diner a few blocks from here, he said. Open 24 hours. Best coffee in Brooklyn, if you don't mind it burnt. I don't have any money, I said. Lost my wallet somewhere. I've got $5. He patted his coat pocket. Enough for 2 coffees, and maybe a slice of pie if we're lucky. You're homeless, and you're buying me coffee? He smiled a small, sad smile that didn't reach his eyes. Consider it an investment, he said. In your future. We walked off the bridge together, as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. The man told me his name was Jack, Old Jack. Most people called him, and he had been living on the streets for about 15 years. He didn't say why. I didn't ask. The coffee was burnt, just as he promised. The pie was stale, but sitting in that fluorescent-lit diner at 4 a.m., listening to a homeless man talk about the pigeons he fed every morning, and the spot under the bridge where the wind didn't blow so hard, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Fragile. Tentative. Easily shattered hope. But hope nonetheless. When the sun came up, old Jack stood to leave. "Will I see you again?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes, pain, longing, regret, but it was gone before I could identify it. "Maybe," he said. "If you need me, I'll be around." "How will I find you?" He smiled that sad smile again. "You won't have to find me, Daniel. I'll find you." I froze. I had never told him my name. By the time I processed this, he was gone, disappeared into the morning crowd like a ghost. Like he had never been there at all. I searched for him for weeks afterward. Walked every street near the bridge. Asked every homeless person I met. Put up flyers with a description. Looking for old Jack. Gray beard. Worn coat. Kind eyes. Nothing. It was as if he had materialized just to save me, then vanished back into whatever realm he came from. Over the years, I convinced myself I had imagined it. The trauma, the cold, the desperation, they had made me hallucinate. Old Jack wasn't real. He was a figment of my broken mind. A guardian angel, conjured by my subconscious to keep me from jumping. I got help. Real help this time. Therapy, medication, a support group for people who had survived suicide attempts. I built myself back up piece by piece, like reassembling a shattered vase. The cracks were still there, but the vase could hold water again. I started a company, a small tech startup that grew into something bigger. By 30, I was a millionaire. By 35, I had made the Forbes 30 under 40 list. A few years late, but still. I met Maggie at a charity gala, a lawyer with sharp eyes and a sharper wit, and married her 2 years later. Life got better. Just like old Jack said it would, but I never forgot him. Every November 15th, I walked to Brooklyn Bridge at 2:47 a.m. and stood at the same spot where I had almost ended my life. I looked out at the water and whispered, "Thank you," to a man I would never see again, until I did. 15 years after that night on the bridge, I found old Jack again, and everything I thought I knew about my life turned out to be a lie. 15 years can change a man. At 38, I was no longer the broken boy who had stood on the wrong side of Brooklyn Bridge. I was Daniel Mercer, CEO of Mercer Technologies, a cybersecurity firm worth $200 million. I had a corner office on the 40th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, a penthouse in Tribeca, a house in the Hamptons, and a wife who loved me despite knowing all my broken pieces. On paper, I was living the American dream. In reality, I was still haunted by ghosts. "You're doing it again." Maggie's voice pulled me back to the present. We were sitting in our favorite restaurant, a small Italian place in the West Village that we had discovered on our third date. She was watching me over the rim of her wine glass, her dark eyes both amused and concerned. "Doing what?" I asked, even though I knew exactly what she meant. "That thing where you stare at nothing and disappear inside your head." She reached across the table and touched my hand. "Where did you go this time?" I looked at my wife, Margaret Chen Mercer, partner at one of the city's top law firms, fierce negotiator, terrible cook, and the only person who had ever seen me at my absolute worst and stayed anyway. "November 15th is coming up," I said. Her expression softened. She knew what that date meant. I had told her everything before we got married. The breakdown, the bridge, the homeless man who had saved my life. It was the kind of secret you couldn't keep from someone you planned to spend forever with. "Do you want me to come with you this year?" she asked. "To the bridge?" I shook my head. "It's something I need to do alone. You know that." "I know." She squeezed my hand. "But the offer's always open." This was why I loved her. She never pushed, never demanded explanations, or forced me to talk when I wasn't ready. She simply stood beside me, solid and patient, like a lighthouse, guiding ships through fog. "How's your mother?" she asked, changing the subject with practiced ease. I felt my jaw tighten involuntarily. "Same as always. Called last week to remind me about the charity gala next month. Made sure to mention that Richard's firm just won some big case. Twice. She's proud of him. She's always been proud of him. He's the son she actually wanted." The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. After all these years, you'd think I'd be over it. But some wounds never fully heal. They just scab over and wait for someone to pick at them. Richard Mercer. My stepfather, though he had never officially adopted me. My mother had married him when I was 4, a year after my biological father supposedly died. Richard was everything a mother could want in a second husband. Successful, charming, wealthy. He had given us a big house in Connecticut, sent me to the best private schools, paid for Columbia without blinking, and I had hated him for as long as I could remember. I couldn't explain why. Richard had never been cruel to me, not overtly, anyway. He provided for me, showed up at my graduations, shook my hand when I succeeded, but there was always something missing, a warmth that should have been there but wasn't. He looked at me sometimes like I was an intruder in his perfect life, a reminder of something he'd rather forget. "You know," Maggie said carefully, "you could try talking to her. Really talking. Ask her about your father, your biological father. You've never actually had that conversation, because she won't have it." I drained my wine glass. Every time I bring up Thomas Mercer, she shuts down, changes the subject, acts like he never existed. "Thomas Mercer," Maggie repeated. "That's the only thing you know about him? His name and the date he died. February 3rd, 1991. I was 3 years old. I signaled the waiter for another glass. No photos, no stories, no grave to visit. It's like he was erased from existence. Don't you think that's strange?" I laughed humorlessly. "Of course it's strange. But my mother is the queen of strange. She raised me in a house full of silence and secrets. Asking questions only made things worse." Maggie was quiet for a moment, her lawyer's mind working behind those dark eyes. "Have you ever tried to find out more?" she asked. "On your own? You have resources now. Investigators. Access." The thought had occurred to me more times than I could count. With my money and connections, I could hire the best private investigators in the country. I could dig into public records, track down old neighbors, find anyone who had known Thomas Mercer before he became a ghost. But something always stopped me. Fear. Maybe. Fear of what I might find. Fear that the truth would be worse than not knowing. Fear that my mother had erased my father for a reason I wasn't ready to face. "Maybe someday," I said, the same answer I always gave. "When I'm ready." Maggie nodded, accepting my deflection as she always did. But I caught the flicker of frustration in her eyes. She was a woman who solved problems for a living. My willful ignorance about my own past must have driven her crazy. We finished dinner and walked home through the cool autumn night. The city was beautiful this time of year, trees turning gold and red. The air crisp with the promise of winter. New York had almost killed me once, but I had made peace with it. It was my home now. The place where I had rebuilt myself from ruins. As we passed a small park, I noticed a figure huddled on one of the benches. A homeless man, wrapped in a dirty blanket, his face hidden beneath a hood. My steps slowed automatically. "Daniel?" Maggie looked back at me. "Go ahead," I said. "I'll catch up." She followed my gaze to the homeless man, then nodded with understanding. This was another thing she knew about me. My compulsion to help people on the streets. I donated to shelters, volunteered at soup kitchens, always carried cash to give away. It was my way of paying forward what old Jack had given me. I walked over to the bench and crouched down. "Hey," I said softly. "You doing okay?" The man stirred, pulling back his hood. He was young, mid-20s, maybe with a scruffy beard and hollow eyes. Track marks dotted his arms. "Got any change?" he mumbled. I pulled out my wallet and handed him a 50. His eyes widened. "Get something to eat," I said. "There's a shelter on 14th Street. They have beds available most nights." "Thanks, man." He clutched the bill like a lifeline. "You're one of the good ones." I stood up, feeling the familiar mix of gratitude and guilt. Gratitude that I had escaped that life. Guilt that I couldn't save everyone who was still trapped in it. "Take care of yourself," I said, and walked back to Maggie. She slipped her arm through mine as we continued toward home. "You know," she said, "you can't save every homeless person in New York." "I know, but you keep trying anyway." "Someone saved me once, a stranger who had nothing, but gave me everything." I looked up at the night sky, searching for stars that were invisible behind the city lights. I owe him a debt I can never repay, so I pay it to others instead. Maggie leaned her head against my shoulder. "He'd be proud of you," she said. I hoped she was right. 15 years later, and I still thought about old Jack almost every day. His gray beard, his worn coat, his eyes that had seemed to look right through me. Asterisk. "Not tonight, son." Asterisk. Those 3 words had saved my life. And I had never gotten the chance to say, "Thank you." The next morning, I woke up at 5 a.m., as usual. Maggie was still asleep. Her dark hair spread across the pillow like spilled ink. I watched her for a moment, marveling at how peaceful she looked, then slipped out of bed and headed for the home gym. Exercise was part of my routine, one of many tools I used to keep the darkness at bay. Therapy, medication, meditation, running, weightlifting. I had built an entire architecture of wellness around myself, a fortress to protect me from the demons that still lurked in the corners of my mind. Most days, it worked. After my workout, I showered, dressed, and took the elevator down to the building's garage. My driver, Marcus, was already waiting with the car, a black Tesla that I pretended to drive myself, but rarely did. "Morning, Mr. Mercer," Marcus said, opening the door for me. "Morning, Marcus. How's your daughter? Still giving you trouble about college?" Marcus grinned. "Applied to 12 schools last week. Says she's going to be a doctor. Good for her. Let me know if she needs a recommendation letter." "You serious?" "Absolutely. Smart kids deserve every advantage they can get." The drive to the office took 40 minutes in morning traffic. I spent it scrolling through emails on my phone, reviewing the day's agenda, preparing for meetings that would consume most of my waking hours. The life of a CEO was not glamorous. It was an endless cycle of decisions, negotiations, and fires that needed putting out. But I was good at it. Building things, solving problems, making something from nothing. It was the only thing that had ever made sense to me. Mercer Technologies occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in Midtown. I had started the company 12 years ago with $50,000. I borrowed from a college friend, working out of a basement apartment in Queens. Now we had 500 employees, offices in 4 countries, and clients that included half the Fortune 500. Success story. American dream. The boy who almost jumped off a bridge becomes a titan of industry. If only it felt as good as it sounded. "Good morning, Mr. Mercer." My assistant, Janet, greeted me with a tablet full of reminders. "You have the board meeting at 9, the investor call at 11, and lunch with the CTO of Nexus Corp at 1. Also, your mother called." I suppressed a sigh. What did she want? She didn't say. Just asked that you call her back when you have a moment. Add it to the list. Bottom. Priority. Janet raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She had been with me for 8 years and knew better than to comment on family matters. The day passed in a blur of meetings, decisions, and corporate politics. By 7 p.m., I was exhausted, but still at my desk, reviewing a contract that needed my signature before tomorrow. My phone buzzed. A text from Maggie. Asterisk. Dinner's getting cold. Come home. Asterisk. I smiled, despite my fatigue. Asterisk. On my way. 30 minutes. Asterisk. I was gathering my things when Janet appeared in the doorway again. Mr. Mercer? There's something I thought you should see. She handed me a newspaper, an actual paper newspaper, which was unusual in the age of digital everything. It was folded to an inside page. A small article circled in red pen. Homeless man saves child from traffic on Brooklyn Bridge. I scanned the article quickly. A child had wandered into traffic near the bridge's pedestrian entrance. A homeless man had pulled her to safety just seconds before a truck would have hit her. The child was fine. The homeless man had disappeared before anyone could thank him. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Janet hesitated. The description of the man. I know you're interested in stories like this. Homeless people doing good deeds. I thought maybe. She trailed off, clearly embarrassed by her own presumption. I read the description again. Asterisk male. Approximately 60 to 70 years old. Gray beard. Worn coat. Witnesses described his eyes as unusually bright and almost silver in certain light. Asterisk. My blood ran cold. Gray beard. Worn coat. Silver eyes. It couldn't be. After 15 years, it couldn't possibly be the same man. And yet, Janet, I said slowly, I need you to find out everything you can about this incident. Who saw it? Where exactly it happened? Any photos or video footage? Of course. Mr. Mercer. She paused. Is everything okay? I stared at the newspaper article, my heart pounding against my ribs. Asterisk. Not tonight. Son. Asterisk. I don't know, I said honestly, but I intend to find out. 3 days after seeing that newspaper article, I found myself standing at the entrance to Brooklyn Bridge at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning. Maggie thought I was at the gym. I hadn't told her about the article. Hadn't mentioned the silver-eyed homeless man who had saved a child from traffic. She would have worried. She would have asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. So I lied. For the first time in our marriage, I looked my wife in the eyes and told her something that wasn't true. The guilt sat heavy in my stomach as I walked onto the bridge. November in New York is a cruel month, cold enough to bite but not cold enough to snow. The wind off the East River cut through my expensive coat like it was made of paper. I shoved my hands deeper into my pockets and kept walking. The bridge was mostly empty at this hour. A few joggers, a couple taking photos of the sunrise, a man walking his dog. None of them paid attention to me, just another anonymous figure in a city of 8 million strangers. I reached the spot where I had almost died 15 years ago. The railing looked the same. The view was the same. But I was different. The broken boy had become a successful man. And the successful man had become what? Someone searching for ghosts. I stood there for nearly an hour, watching the sun climb higher over the Manhattan skyline. The city woke up around me, traffic increasing, pedestrians multiplying, the endless rhythm of urban life resuming its daily dance. No sign of old Jack. I came back the next day. And the day after that, every morning for a week, I made the pilgrimage to Brooklyn Bridge, stood at the same spot, and waited for a man who might not even exist anymore. Janet had found nothing useful. No photos of the homeless hero, no video footage. The witnesses had given vague descriptions that could have matched any number of elderly homeless men in the city. The trail was cold before it ever got warm. I was starting to think I had imagined the whole thing, that my desperate desire to find old Jack had made me see connections where none existed when everything changed. It was a Thursday evening, exactly 11 days after I'd seen the newspaper article. I was walking home from the office, having dismissed Marcus early because I needed time to think. The route took me through a small park near City Hall, a shortcut I rarely used. That's when I saw him. He was sitting on a bench near the fountain, feeding pigeons from a paper bag. Gray beard, tangled and unkempt. A coat that might have been green once, but had faded to something between brown and gray. Even from 50 feet away, I could see the unusual brightness of his eyes. My heart stopped. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. 15 years of wondering, 15 years of searching, 15 years of convincing myself that old Jack was nothing but a fever dream, and here he was, real, alive, feeding pigeons in a park like any other old man. I forced my legs to carry me forward. 1 step, 2, 10, 20. He looked up when I was about 15 feet away. Our eyes met, and I saw recognition flash across his face, quick, instinctive, immediately suppressed. He knew who I was. He remembered. "Nice evening," he said, his voice exactly as I remembered it. Calm, unhurried, like we were strangers commenting on the weather. "You," I breathed. "It's you." He tilted his head, playing innocent. "Do I know you?" Brooklyn Bridge. 15 years ago. November 15th. My voice was shaking. "You saved my life." Something shifted in his expression. The mask slipped, just for a second, revealing the man underneath tired, sad, carrying a weight I couldn't comprehend. "I think you have me confused with someone else," he said. But his voice had lost its casual tone. "No." I stepped closer. "No, I don't. I've thought about that night every single day for 15 years. I've looked for you everywhere. I put up flyers. I asked every homeless person in Brooklyn. And you just vanished." The old man was silent. He had stopped feeding the pigeons, his hand frozen in the paper bag. "You called me son," I continued, my voice cracking. "You knew my name without me telling you. You said you'd find me if I needed you. And then you disappeared. People say a lot of things," he muttered. "Doesn't mean anything." It meant everything to me. The words exploded out of me, louder than I intended. A passing jogger glanced over, startled. I lowered my voice. "You gave me a reason to keep living. You bought me coffee with your last $5. You showed me a photograph of your son and told me about chances and hope, and..." I stopped. The photograph. In the chaos of that night, I had forgotten one crucial detail. "The photograph," I said slowly. "You showed me a picture. A young man holding a baby. You said it was your son." The old man's face went pale. "I remember that photo," I continued. "I remember the man in it. He looked happy. He looked like he had everything to live for." I took another step closer. Who was he? Who was that man? Nobody. The word came out, harsh, defensive. Just a memory. A ghost. Ghosts don't save people's lives. Ghosts don't sit with strangers on bridges until sunrise. I was standing right in front of him now, close enough to see the lines carved deep into his weathered face. "Who are you?" "Really?" For a long moment, the old man said nothing. The pigeons, sensing the tension, scattered into the evening air. The fountain gurgled behind us, indifferent to the drama unfolding nearby. Then he looked up at me with those silver-gray eyes. And I saw something I hadn't expected. Fear. Not fear of me, fear of something else. "You should go home, Daniel," he said quietly. "Go back to your wife, your company, your life. Forget you ever saw me." "How do you know about my wife?" "My company?" He didn't answer. "You've been watching me," I realized. "All these years. You've been watching me, haven't you?" Still no answer. But his silence was confirmation enough. "Why?" I demanded. "Why would a homeless stranger spend 15 years watching me? What am I to you?" The old man closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were glistening with unshed tears. "You're everything," he whispered. "You've always been everything." The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered backward, my mind reeling. "What does that mean? What are you talking about?" But the old man was already standing, gathering his meager belongings, the paper bag, a worn backpack. a blanket that had seen better decades. Wait. I grabbed his arm. You can't just leave. Not again. Not after 15 years of. Let go of me. His voice was firm but not angry. Please. No. Not until you tell me the truth. He looked at my hand on his arm, then at my face. Something in his expression shifted resignation, maybe, or acceptance. The truth, he repeated. You want the truth. The truth will destroy everything you think you know about your life, about your family, about yourself. He shook his head slowly. Some doors are better left closed, Daniel. I don't care. I need to know. You say that now. But once you know, you can never unknow. You can never go back to the life you had before. He placed his free hand over mine, warm, gentle, almost paternal. I've watched you build something beautiful. A career, a marriage, a future. I don't want to be the one who tears it down. You won't be tearing anything down. You'll be giving me answers. Closure. I tightened my grip. Please. I've been searching for 15 years. I deserve to know who saved my life. The old man studied my face for a long moment. I didn't know what he was looking for, but apparently, he found it. Not here, he said finally. Not like this. There's a diner 2 blocks east. 4-hour place, just like the one we went to that night. Meet me there tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. I'll tell you everything. Why not now? Because I need time. Time to figure out how to say what needs to be said. He gently removed my hand from his arm. Tomorrow, Daniel, I promise. How do I know you won't disappear again? That sad smile crossed his face, the same smile I remembered from 15 years ago. I've been watching over you your entire life, he said. I'm not going to stop now. Before I could respond, he turned and walked away. But this time, I didn't let him vanish. I followed at a distance, keeping him in sight until he ducked into an alley between 2 buildings. When I reached the alley, I saw where he was going. A small encampment of tents and cardboard shelters, a makeshift village for those the city had forgotten. This was where old Jack lived. This was where he had been all along, just a few miles from my penthouse, sleeping on concrete while I slept on Egyptian cotton. I stood at the entrance to the alley for a long time, watching the flickering lights of small fires, hearing the murmur of voices and the occasional cough. Somewhere in there was a man who had saved my life, a man who claimed I was everything to him, a man whose truth could destroy my world. Tomorrow, I would find out why. I walked home in a daze, my mind churning with questions. How had he known my name? Why had he been watching me? What connection could possibly exist between a CEO and a homeless man? The answer was there, hovering at the edge of my consciousness. I could almost see it, almost grasp it, but every time I reached for it, it slipped away. Maggie was asleep when I got home. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her breathe, thinking about what old Jack had said. Asterisk. The truth will destroy everything you think you know about your life. Asterisk. Was I ready for that? Was I ready to have my world torn apart? I thought about the boy on the bridge, the broken, desperate boy who had wanted to die. He had been destroyed too, in a way. The person I was before that night no longer existed. Old Jack had killed him and given birth to someone new. Maybe that was what needed to happen again. Maybe the person I was now needed to die so that someone truer could emerge. I climbed into bed beside my wife, but I didn't sleep. I lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, counting the hours until 6 a.m., until the truth, until everything changed. I arrived at the diner at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes early. I couldn't sleep anyway. The place was called Sal's 24, Our Diner, a relic from another era with cracked vinyl booths, a counter lined with spinning stools, and a jukebox in the corner that probably hadn't worked since the Reagan administration. It smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease, exactly like the diner old Jack had taken me to 15 years ago. I chose a booth near the back where I could see the entrance. A waitress with tired eyes and a name tag that said Dorothy brought me coffee without asking. I wrapped my hands around the mug and waited. 5:55 a.m. No sign of him. 6 a.m. The door stayed closed. 6:15 a.m. My coffee went cold. 6:30 a.m. My heart began to sink. By 7 a.m., I knew he wasn't coming. I sat in that booth for another hour, staring at the door, willing it to open. But old Jack had vanished again, just like he had 15 years ago, just like he always did. The disappointment was crushing. I had been so close to finally getting answers, and now I was back to square one. The questions that had haunted me for 15 years remained unanswered, multiplied now by a dozen more. Asterisk. You're everything. You've always been everything. Asterisk. What did that mean? What could I possibly be to a homeless stranger? I threw a 20 on the table and walked out into the gray morning. The city was waking up around me, people heading to work, cars honking, the endless machine of New York grinding into motion. I stood on the sidewalk, lost and directionless, wondering what to do next. Then I remembered the alley, the encampment, old Jack's home. I hailed a cab and gave the driver the address. 20 minutes later, I was standing at the entrance to the same alley I had followed Jack to the night before. In daylight, the encampment looked different, sadder, more desperate. The tents were patched with tape and garbage bags. The cardboard shelters sagged with moisture from last night's rain. A few figures moved among the debris, starting their day the same way they started every day. I walked into the alley, drawing suspicious looks from the residents. A man with a shopping cart full of cans stepped into my path. "You lost, suit?" he asked, his voice rough from years of hard living. "I'm looking for someone." The man's expression shifted recognition, quickly masked. "Don't know anyone by that name, please." I reached for my wallet, pulled out a $100 bill. "It's important. He saved my life once. I just want to talk to him." The man eyed the money, then looked over his shoulder at a tent near the end of the alley. When he turned back to me, his face was conflicted. "He left early this morning," he said. "Before sunrise. Took his stuff and went." "Where?" "Didn't say. Just said he had to go somewhere. Said someone was coming for him and he couldn't be here when they arrived." He paused. "I think he meant you." The words felt like a punch to the gut. Old Jack had run. After promising to tell me everything, after saying he'd been watching over me my whole life, he had run. Did he say anything else? Anything at all? The man hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "He left this. Said to give it to the man in the expensive coat who came looking for him." I took the paper with trembling hands. It was brown bag material, torn and wrinkled, with words scrawled in pencil. "Daniel, I'm sorry. I thought I was ready, but I'm not. Some truths are too heavy to carry, even after all these years. Asterisk. If you really want answers, start with your mother. Ask her about February 3rd, 1991. Ask her about the night your father died. Asterisk. Don't trust Richard. He is not who you think he is. Asterisk. I'll find you when I'm ready. I promise. Asterisk. P.S. Look in the attic of your mother's house, behind the old trunk with the broken lock. That's where she hides the things she wants to forget. Asterisk. I read the note 3 times, memorizing every word. Then, I folded it carefully and tucked it into my pocket. February 3rd, 1991. The night my father died. The date my mother had given me when I asked about Thomas Mercer, the only information she had ever shared. But old Jack's note implied something else, something darker. He had put the word "died" in quotation marks. What if my father hadn't died at all? I spent the rest of that day in my office, But I wasn't working. I was thinking, planning, trying to figure out my next move. The obvious choice was to confront my mother. Demand answers about February 3rd, 1991. Ask her what really happened to Thomas Mercer. But I knew Victoria. She was a fortress of secrets, surrounded by walls she had spent 35 years building. A direct assault would fail. She would deflect, deny, redirect. The same tactics she had used my entire life. No. I needed to gather evidence first. I needed to know what I was dealing with before I faced her. That meant starting with old Jack's final suggestion. The attic. My mother still lived in the same house in Greenwich, Connecticut, a sprawling colonial that Richard had bought when they got married. I had grown up in that house, walked its halls for 18 years, and never once thought to explore its attic. It was always locked, always off limits, always explained away as storage for old things. Old things. Like secrets. I called Maggie at lunch. "Hey," she answered. "You okay? You left early this morning." "I'm fine. Listen, I need to visit my mother this weekend. Family stuff." "Okay." She sounded surprised. "I rarely volunteered to see Victoria. Do you want me to come with you?" "Actually, yes." The plan was forming in my mind as I spoke. "I want you to keep her occupied while I look for something." A pause. "Daniel, what's going on?" I hesitated. I had already lied to her once, this week. I didn't want to make it a habit. "I met someone," I said carefully. "Someone from my past. He told me that my mother has been hiding things from me. Things about my father." "Your biological father?" "Thomas?" "Yes. There might be evidence in her attic. Documents, photos, something that explains what really happened to him. And you want me to distract your mother while you snoop through her belongings?" It wasn't a question. I know it sounds crazy. It sounds necessary. Her voice had shifted into lawyer mode. Practical, analytical, ready for action. "Your mother has stonewalled you about your father for 35 years. If there's evidence that she's been lying, you have every right to find it." God. I loved this woman. "So you'll help me?" "Of course I'll help you. I'm your wife." A pause. "But Daniel, whatever we find up there, whatever the truth is, we face it together. Okay?" "Together," I agreed. Always. That night, I did something I should have done years ago. I hired a private investigator. His name was Marcus Webb, no relation to my driver, a former NYPD detective who now ran his own firm, specializing in discreet inquiries. I had used his services before for corporate background checks. He was thorough, professional, and most importantly knew how to keep his mouth shut. We met at a bar in Midtown, the kind of place where businessmen went to discuss things they didn't want overheard. I told him what I needed, everything he could find, about Thomas Mercer, my biological father, who had supposedly died on February 3rd, 1991. Marcus listened without interrupting, taking notes in a small leather notebook. "What do you know about him?" he asked, when I finished. "Almost nothing. His name, the date he died. That's it. My mother refuses to talk about him. Any photos? None that I've ever seen. Death certificate? I don't know. I've never looked for one." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's the first place to start. Death certificates are public record. If your father died in New York or Connecticut, there'll be documentation. And if there isn't," he met my eyes, "then we have a different kind of case on our hands." I nodded slowly. The implication was clear. If there was no death certificate, then Thomas Mercer might not be dead at all. "There's something else," I said. "A man who might be connected to my father. He goes by Old Jack. Homeless. Lives somewhere in Brooklyn. Gray beard, silver eyes, about 65 years old." "You want me to find him?" "Yes. But don't approach him. Just find out where he is. I need to talk to him again. Marcus made another note. Anything else I should know? I thought about it. About the note in my pocket. About the warning not to trust Richard. My stepfather, I said. Richard Mercer. He married my mother about a year after my biological father died. I want to know everything about him too. His background. His relationship with my father. Everything. Richard Mercer, the lawyer? Big firm downtown? That's him. Marcus whistled softly. That's going to require some careful digging. Men like that tend to have their tracks well covered. I don't care how long it takes or how much it costs. I need the truth. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. I'll have preliminary findings within a week. Deep background might take longer a month, maybe 2. He finished his drink and stood. One piece of advice? Mr. Mercer? What? Be careful what you wish for. In my experience, family secrets stay buried for a reason. Sometimes the truth does more damage than the lies ever did. I thought about old Jack's note. About the quotation marks around the word, died. I appreciate the warning, I said. But I've been living with lies my entire life. It's time I found out what I've been missing. Marcus shrugged. Your call. I'll be in touch. After he left, I sat alone at the bar. My phone buzzed. A text. From Maggie. Asterisk. Confirmed with your mother. Dinner Saturday at 6. She seemed surprised but pleased. Asterisk. W. Asterisk. I stared at the message, imagining Victoria's reaction. Her prodigal son, finally coming to visit without being guilted or coerced. She probably thought it was a breakthrough. A reconciliation. She had no idea what was really coming. Asterisk. Perfect. Asterisk. I texted back. Asterisk. See you at home. Asterisk. I finished my whiskey, paid the tab, and stepped out into the cold November night. The city glittered around me, indifferent to my small human drama. Somewhere out there, old Jack was hiding, carrying secrets he was too afraid to share. Somewhere in Greenwich, my mother was preparing for a dinner that would become an interrogation. And somewhere in my past, the truth about Thomas Mercer was waiting to be uncovered. I had spent 35 years in the dark. It was time to turn on the lights. The house in Greenwich looked exactly as I remembered it, a white colonial monster with black shutters, a wraparound porch, and a lawn so perfectly manicured it could have been fake. Growing up, I had called it the museum. Everything inside was expensive, pristine, and untouchable, including my mother. Maggie squeezed my hand as we pulled into the circular driveway. You ready for this? No, I admitted. But I don't think I ever will be. Victoria Mercer opened the door before we reached it, as if she had been watching from the window. At 62, she was still a beautiful woman. Silver hair perfectly styled, posture impeccable, dressed in a cashmere sweater and slacks that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Daniel. She offered her cheek for a kiss. What a pleasant surprise. You usually need 3 weeks' notice and a court order to visit. Hello, Mother. I kissed her cheek dutifully. You remember Maggie. Of course. Victoria's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She had never warmed to my wife. Too smart, too independent, too difficult to control. Lovely to see you again, Margaret. Victoria. Maggie's smile was equally cool. Thank you for having us. We followed my mother inside. The house smelled like furniture, polish and lilies, the same scent that had permeated my childhood. Every surface gleamed, every painting hung at precisely the right angle. It was less a home than a showroom, a place designed to impress visitors rather than comfort residents. Richard sends his apologies, Victoria said as she led us to the living room. He had a dinner meeting with clients. You know how it is. I felt a flicker of relief. Richard's absence would make things easier. That's fine, I said. I actually wanted to spend some time with you. Just the 3 of us. Victoria raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She gestured for us to sit on the cream-colored sofa, another piece of furniture that had always felt more like a museum exhibit than something meant to be used. "Can I get you anything?" "Wine? Coffee?" "Wine would be lovely," Maggie said. "Let me help you." This was our plan. Maggie would keep Victoria occupied in the kitchen while I slipped away to the attic. We had rehearsed it in the car, timing how long Maggie could reasonably stretch a conversation about wine selection. But as my mother and wife disappeared into the kitchen, I hesitated. The stairs to the second floor were just down the hall. The attic access was in the master bedroom closet, a pull-down ladder I had glimpsed once as a child before being shooed away. I had maybe 10 minutes. I moved quickly, my heart pounding. The stairs creaked beneath my feet. They had always creaked. A built-in alarm system that made sneaking around as a teenager nearly impossible. I paused at the top, listening for voices from the kitchen. Maggie was asking about the vintage of a particular Bordeaux. Good. She was buying me time. The master bedroom was at the end of the hall. I had rarely been inside as a child. It was my mother's sanctuary, off limits except for special occasions. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was exactly what I expected. Elegant, spotless, devoid of personality. A king-sized bed with white linens. A vanity table with silver-handled brushes, arranged in perfect rows. 2 nightstands, 2 lamps, 2 people who had shared this space for 33 years. The closet was a walk-in, larger than my first apartment. I found the attic access at the back, hidden behind a row of Richard's suits. The ladder was dusty, clearly not used often. I pulled it down and climbed. The attic was dark, hot, and filled with decades of accumulated junk. Boxes stacked on boxes, old furniture covered in sheets, a dress form that startled me when my flashlight caught it. The air was thick with dust and forgotten memories. Asterisk. Behind the old trunk with the broken lock. Asterisk. I scanned the space, looking for the trunk old Jack had described. There were several candidates: vintage luggage, wooden chests, plastic bins. I started with the oldest-looking one. A leather trunk with brass fittings that had clearly seen better days. The lock wasn't broken. I tried another. The third trunk was pushed into a corner, half hidden behind a stack of cardboard boxes. It was made of dark wood, the kind of thing that might have been handed down through generations. And the lock, a simple padlock, had been cut clean through, the metal edges still bright where the bolt cutters had done their work. My hands were shaking as I lifted the lid. Inside was a mess of papers, photographs, and documents that had clearly been shoved in without care. The first photo made me gasp. It was a wedding picture. A young couple standing in front of a church, the bride in white, the groom in a dark suit. The woman was unmistakably my mother, younger, softer, with a smile I had never seen on her face before. And the man looked exactly like me. Same jaw, same nose, same gray-blue eyes that stared back at me every morning in the mirror. He was handsome, happy, holding my mother's hand like she was the most precious thing in the world. Thomas Mercer. My father. I flipped through more photos. Thomas and Victoria at a beach. Thomas and Victoria at a party. Thomas holding a baby. Me. I realized with tears of joy streaming down his face. He looked nothing like a monster. He looked like a man in love. I dug deeper into the trunk. More photos. Birthday cards. A marriage certificate dated the 15th of June, 1985. And then, a newspaper clipping. The headline made my blood run cold. Asterisk, asterisk. Local man, accused of assault, claims innocence. Asterisk, asterisk. The article was dated the 28th of January, 1991. 6 days before my father supposedly died. Asterisk, Thomas Mercer, 30, of Greenwich, CT, was arrested yesterday on charges of sexual assault. The alleged victim, Elena Rodriguez, 25, a housekeeper employed by the Mercer family, claims that Mr. Mercer attacked her on the evening of January 25th. Mr. Mercer denies all charges and has retained legal representation. He is currently free on $50,000 bail. Asterisk. I read the article 3 times, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. Sexual assault. My father had been accused of sexual assault. Was this why my mother never spoke of him? Was this the dark secret she had been hiding all these years? Had Thomas Mercer really been a monster after all? But something didn't add up. The article said he denied the charges. And old Jack's note had implied that my father hadn't really died, that something else had happened on February 3rd. I kept digging. More newspaper clippings. The case against Thomas Mercer. His arraignment. A follow-up article about the prominent Greenwich family torn apart by scandal. And then, at the very bottom of the trunk, I found it. A death certificate. Asterisk. Thomas Andrew Mercer. Date of death. The 3rd of February, 1991. Cause of death. Suicide by hanging. Asterisk. I stared at the document, trying to reconcile it with everything I had learned. My father had been accused of assault. A week later, he had killed himself. Case closed. Mystery solved. Except, old Jack had put quotation marks around the word died. He had told me not to trust Richard. He had been watching me my entire life as if I meant something to him. Why would a stranger care so much about the son of a suicide victim? Unless I heard footsteps on the stairs. Daniel? I shoved the documents back into the trunk, grabbed the wedding photo and the death certificate, and stuffed them into my jacket. I was halfway down the ladder when Victoria appeared in the closet doorway. Her face went white. What are you doing? Looking for answers. I stepped off the ladder, facing her directly. Answers you've refused to give me for 35 years. You had no right. I had every right. The anger that had been building inside me finally exploded. He was my father, and you erased him. No photos, no stories, no memories, like he never existed. Victoria's composure cracked. For a moment, she looked old and tired and frightened. You don't understand, she said. You don't know what he did. I know he was accused of assault. I found the newspaper clippings. I pulled out the wedding photo. I also found this. He looked happy here. You looked happy. What happened? My mother stared at the photo like it was a ghost. Where did you find that? In the trunk. The one with the broken lock. The one where you hide the things you want to forget. Something shifted in her expression. Fear. But not fear of me. Fear of the truth. Who told you about the trunk? I hesitated. Should I mention old Jack? The note? Does it matter? I asked instead. What matters is that you've been lying to me my entire life. And I want to know why. Victoria was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she walked to the bed and sat down. She suddenly looked every one of her 62 years. Sit down, Daniel, she said quietly. It's time I told you the truth, or at least part of it. I sat in a chair across from her, the wedding photo still clutched in my hand. Downstairs, I could hear Maggie calling my name, but I ignored her. This was the moment I had waited 35 years for. Your father, Victoria began, her voice barely above a whisper, was not the man you think he was. Was he guilty? Did he assault that woman? My mother closed her eyes. No, she said. Thomas never touched Elena. He was innocent. Then why? Because I needed him gone. The words came out flat, emotionless, like a confession rehearsed 1,000 times. I was having an affair with Richard. We had been together for 2 years, and I wanted out of my marriage. But Thomas refused to give me a divorce. He said he would never let me take you away from him. The room tilted. I gripped the arms of the chair. You framed him? I convinced Elena to lie. Paid her $50,000 to say Thomas had attacked her. I thought he would take a plea deal, go to prison for a few years, and I would get full custody. Victoria's voice cracked. I never thought he would kill himself. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. He hung himself in the garage. The night before his trial was supposed to start, he left a note saying he couldn't live with the shame, even if he was innocent. He said he would rather die than have you grow up believing your father was a rapist. I felt sick. My father, my innocent father, had killed himself because of a lie, because of my mother's affair, because she had chosen Richard over him. And Richard? I asked, my voice cold. Did he know? Victoria looked away. He helped plan it. The accusation, the evidence. He had connections in the legal system. He made sure the case would stick. She wiped her eyes. After Thomas died, we waited a year for appearances, and then we got married. I stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over the chair. You destroyed him. You and Richard. You destroyed an innocent man. I know. Victoria's voice was barely audible. I've lived with that guilt every day for 35 years. No. I shook my head. You lived with a lie. You lived with money and comfort and a husband who helped you murder my father. That's not guilt. That's complicity. I walked toward the door. Daniel, please, don't. I turned back to face her. Don't ask me for forgiveness. Don't ask me to understand. You stole my father from me. You let me grow up believing he was a monster. And for what? So you could be with Richard. I loved him, she whispered. I loved Richard, and I loved my father. Except I never got the chance. I opened the door. We're done here, Mother. Don't contact me again. I walked out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and past a confused Maggie, who was still holding a glass of wine. Daniel, what happened? We're leaving. I grabbed my coat. I'll explain in the car. As we drove away from the house in Greenwich, I looked back one last time. My mother was standing in the doorway, watching us go. She looked small, broken, good, I thought. Now she knows how it feels. But even as the anger burned inside me, a small voice whispered that something still didn't add up. My father had killed himself. The death certificate was real. The suicide note was real. So why had old Jack put quotation marks around the word died? And why did he look exactly like the man in that wedding photograph? The drive back to Manhattan was silent. Maggie knew better than to push. She could see the storm raging behind my eyes, the fury and confusion battling for control. When we finally got home, I went straight to the study and poured myself a whiskey. My hands were still shaking. Daniel. Maggie stood in the doorway. Talk to me. So I did. I told her everything, the trunk, the photos, the newspaper clippings, my mother's confession, the affair with Richard, the false accusation, my father's suicide. By the time I finished, Maggie was sitting on the couch, her face pale. My God, she breathed. Daniel, I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Be angry. I drained my glass. They murdered him. Maybe not with their hands, but they murdered him all the same. They took everything from him, his reputation, his freedom, his son, and left him with nothing but a rope and a garage. What are you going to do? I stared at the wedding photo I had taken from the trunk. My father's face. My face. I don't know yet. But something still doesn't add up. I handed her the photo. Look at him. Look at his eyes. Maggie studied the picture. He looks like you. Remarkably like you. Now think about old Jack. Gray beard. Silver gray eyes. The way he looked at me like he'd known me my whole life. I paused, letting the implication sink in. What if my father didn't die? What if the suicide was staged? Maggie's eyes widened. You think old Jack is your father? I don't know what to think. But I'm going to find out. Marcus Webb called me 3 days later. I've got something, he said. Can you meet? We met at the same bar as before. Marcus slid a manila folder across the table. Let's start with Thomas Mercer, he said. I pulled his death certificate, like you asked. Official cause of death. Suicide by hanging. Body was found by his brother Richard Mercer on the morning of February 3rd. 1000. 991. Richard found him? According to the police report, yes. Richard went to check on Thomas after he didn't answer his phone. Found him hanging in the garage. Case was open and shut. Suicide note. History of depression following the assault charges. No signs of foul play. I thought about that. Richard had been the one to find the body. Richard, who had been sleeping with Victoria. Richard, who had helped frame Thomas in the first place. Convenient. Was there an autopsy? Brief one. Cause of death confirmed as asphyxiation. The body was cremated 2 days later. Cremated? Why so fast? Marcus shrugged. Family's decision. Victoria requested it. Said she didn't want a prolonged mourning period for the sake of her son. He paused. That would be you. My mother had cremated my father's body within 48 hours. No funeral, no burial, no grave for me to visit. She had erased him completely, unless there was nothing to bury. What about the assault charges? I asked. The woman who accused him, Elena Rodriguez. Were you able to find her? Marcus nodded slowly. That's where things get interesting. He pulled another document from the folder. It was a photocopy of a bank statement. Elena Rodriguez received a wire transfer of $50,000 on January 30th, 1991, 2 days after she made her accusation. The money came from an offshore account that I traced back to a shell company registered in Delaware. Let me guess. The company was connected to Richard. Got it in one. Richard's law firm used that same shell company for client payments going back to 1988. Marcus leaned forward. Your stepfather paid off the accuser. That's not speculation, that's documented fact. I felt a cold satisfaction. Proof. Finally, I had proof. Where's Elena now? That's the other interesting part. Marcus pulled out a photo. An older woman, Hispanic, with gray-streaked hair and tired eyes. She lives in Queens. Same apartment she's had for 30 years. Works at a dry cleaner. Never married. No kids. She stayed in New York? After taking $50,000? $50,000 doesn't go as far as you'd think. Especially when guilt keeps you from spending it. Marcus tapped the photo. I did some digging. Elena's had the same confession on file at a Catholic church in her neighborhood since 1992. Father Martinez, her priest, confirmed she's been carrying what she calls a terrible sin for decades. My heart pounded. She might talk. She might. But approaching her is risky. If she warns your mother or Richard, she won't. I was certain of that. Elena has been living with this guilt for 35 years. She wants to confess. She's been waiting for someone to ask. Marcus studied me. You want me to set up a meeting? No. I'll do it myself. I took the photo. This is personal. But before I could reach out to Elena, Marcus dropped the real bombshell. There's one more thing, he said, pulling the last document from his folder. About old Jack. I tensed. You found him? Not exactly. But I found something else. He handed me a photocopy of an old driver's license. This was issued to Thomas Andrew Mercer in 1985. Look at the photo. I looked, and my world tilted on its axis. The photo showed a young man with dark hair and gray-blue eyes. The same man from the wedding picture. The same man who had held me as a baby. But it was more than that. It was the same face I had seen on Brooklyn Bridge 15 years ago. The same face that had looked at me in the park. The same face that had called me son and bought me coffee with his last $5. Old Jack was Thomas Mercer. Old Jack was my father. The death certificate was faked, I whispered, or the suicide was staged. Marcus corrected. Either way, if old Jack is who you think he is, then Thomas Mercer has been alive for 35 years, living on the streets, watching you. From a distance, I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. My father was alive. He had been alive my entire life. He had watched me grow up, graduate, build a company, get married. He had saved me from jumping off a bridge, And he had never told me who he was. Why? I asked, my voice cracking. Why would he do that? Why would he let me think he was dead? That's something only he can answer. Marcus gathered his files. But if I had to guess, he was protecting you. From the scandal. From the lies. From whatever Richard and your mother might have done if they knew he was still alive. I thought about my mother's reaction when I mentioned the trunk. The fear in her eyes. Not fear of me, fear of discovery. Asterisk. Who told you about the trunk? Asterisk. She had asked that question like she already knew the answer. Like she suspected someone from her past had come back to haunt her. I need to find him, I said. I need to find my father. I've got people looking. The homeless population in Brooklyn is transient, but he can't hide forever. Not now that someone's actively searching. Marcus stood. Give me a few more days. I'll have a location. After he left, I sat alone at the bar, staring at the driver's license photo. Thomas Mercer, born the 15th of March 1960. Eyes, gray. Hair, brown. Height, 6'1". My father, alive. The anger I had felt toward my mother paled in comparison to the emotions flooding through me now. Confusion, betrayal, a desperate, aching hope that I had never allowed myself to feel before. For 35 years, I had believed I was an orphan in all but name, a boy with no father, raised by a mother who felt like a stranger, and a stepfather who looked at me like a mistake. But I had a father, a real father, one who had loved me enough to stay close, to watch from the shadows, to save my life when I wanted to end it. He had sacrificed everything, his identity, his freedom, his chance at a normal life, to protect me from a truth he thought would destroy me. And now I understood why he had run when I found him in the park, why he had broken his promise to meet me at the diner, why he had spent 15 years avoiding the question I desperately needed answered. He was afraid. Afraid that I would hate him for abandoning me. Afraid that knowing the truth would ruin the life I had built. Afraid that after 35 years of silence, I wouldn't be able to forgive him. But he was wrong. I wasn't going to hate him. I wasn't going to reject him. I was going to bring him home. That night, I showed Maggie the driver's license photo next to the wedding picture. She saw it immediately, the same jaw, the same eyes, the same face aged by 35 years of hardship. It's him, she said softly. Old Jack is your father, and he's been alive this whole time, watching you, protecting you. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, she took my hand. What do you need from me? Help me find him. Help me bring him home. I squeezed her fingers. And when I confront Richard, I need you there. As my lawyer and my wife, Richard helped frame your father. That's criminal conspiracy. We could go to the police. Not yet. First, I need to hear the full story. From Elena, from my father, from everyone who was there that night. I looked at the photos spread across the table. My mother gave me half the truth. I need the rest before I can decide what to do with it. Maggie nodded. Then we start tomorrow. Elena Rodriguez first? Elena first. Then my father. I took a deep breath. And then Richard. The pieces were finally coming together. After 35 years of lies, the truth was within reach. And when I had it, when I knew everything, there would be a reckoning. For my father. For myself. For all the years that had been stolen from us. Richard Mercer had no idea what was coming. Before I could talk to Elena, Richard came to me. It was Monday evening. Maggie was working late at the firm, and I was in my home office reviewing the files Marcus had compiled. The doorman buzzed up with an unexpected announcement. Mr. Mercer, your stepfather is here to see you. I froze. Richard never visited unannounced. In 33 years of being my father, he had come to my home exactly twice. Once for my engagement party, and once when I made the Forbes list. Both times, Victoria had been with him. Send him up, I said. I had 3 minutes to compose myself. I tucked the files into a drawer, poured 2 whiskeys, and arranged my face into a mask of polite neutrality. Whatever Richard wanted, I couldn't let him know what I had discovered. Not yet. The elevator doors opened directly into our penthouse. Richard stepped out, looking every inch the successful lawyer gray suit, silk tie, silver cufflinks that probably cost more than most people's cars. At 60, he was still handsome, in a cold, calculated way. The kind of man who smiled with his mouth, but never his eyes. Daniel. He extended his hand. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. I shook his hand, noting how firm his grip was. Dominant. Controlling. Whiskey? Please. I handed him a glass and gestured toward the living room. We sat across from each other, two predators circling, each waiting for the other to make the first move. Your mother is worried about you, Richard began. She said you visited last weekend. That things got heated. Did she tell you what we discussed? She told me enough. He swirled his whiskey, watching the amber liquid catch the light. You found some old photographs. Asked questions about your biological father, Thomas Mercer. I kept my voice steady. The man you replaced. Something flickered in Richard's eyes. A warning. A challenge. Thomas was a troubled man, Daniel. What happened to him was tragic, but it wasn't anyone's fault but his own. Is that what you tell yourself? To help you sleep at night? Richard's jaw tightened. I understand. You're upset. Finding out about the assault charges must have been, he was innocent. The words hung in the air like a blade. Richard's expression didn't change, but I saw his fingers tighten around his glass. A micro-reaction. A tell. The evidence suggested otherwise, he said carefully. Elena Rodriguez was very convincing. Elena Rodriguez was paid $50,000 to lie. I leaned forward. From an offshore account connected to your law firm. Silence. For the first time since I'd known him. Richard looked uncertain. His mask slipped, revealing something ugly underneath fear. Calculation. The desperate mental arithmetic of a man whose secrets were unraveling. Where did you hear that? He asked quietly. Does it matter? I have the bank records, the wire transfer, the shell company with your fingerprints all over it. I stood up, unable to contain my anger any longer. You paid her off. You helped my mother frame an innocent man, and when he couldn't take it anymore, when the shame became too much, you let him die. You don't know what you're talking about. Then enlighten me. I was shouting now. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you didn't destroy my father's life so you could steal his wife. Tell me you didn't find his body conveniently hanging in that garage. He was going to ruin everything. Richard's composure shattered. He was on his feet, face red, veins bulging in his neck. For a moment, he looked capable of violence. Then, just as quickly, the mask returned. He straightened his tie, smoothed his jacket, and sat back down. You want the truth? His voice was ice. Fine. Here's the truth. Your father was a weak man, a sentimental fool who couldn't see what was right in front of him. Victoria and I had been together for 2 years before he even suspected. 2 years of sneaking around, lying, pretending to be the dutiful brother-in-law while I was sleeping with his wife. My stomach turned. You're disgusting. I'm honest. Something your father never was honest about what he wanted. He clung to Victoria like a drowning man clings to driftwood. Refused to accept that she didn't love him anymore. Refused to give her a divorce. Richard's lip curled, so we gave him a choice. Walk away quietly. Give Victoria custody of you, and we'd let him keep his reputation, or fight us and lose everything. And when he chose to fight, Elena was persuadable. She needed money for her mother's medical bills. We offered her a solution. Richard shrugged, like they were discussing a business deal. The accusation was supposed to be temporary, just enough to pressure Thomas into signing the divorce papers. We didn't expect him to. Kill himself? Richard looked away. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something that might have been regret. No. We didn't expect that. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to wrap my hands around his throat and squeeze until that smug expression disappeared forever. But I held back. I still didn't have the complete picture. You found the body, I said. The morning of February 3rd. You were the only witness. The police investigated. There was nothing suspicious. The police didn't know you had motive. They didn't know about the affair, the bribe, the conspiracy to destroy him. I stepped closer. How do I know you didn't kill him yourself? How do I know the suicide wasn't staged? Richard's face went pale. You're insane. Am I? Because from where I'm standing, you had everything to gain from Thomas's death. The wife, the money, the chance to raise his son as your own. I let that sink in. Did you kill my father, Richard? Did you hang an innocent man and call it suicide? No. He was shaking now, whether from fear or rage, I couldn't tell. I didn't kill him. I found him exactly like I told the police, hanging from the rafters with a note pinned to his chest. I would never, but you let him die. You drove him to it. You and my mother took everything from him, and when he broke, you just let it happen. Richard said nothing. His silence was confirmation enough. Get out, Daniel. Get out of my home. He stood slowly, adjusting his cuffs with hands that weren't quite steady. You're making a mistake, he said, digging into the past like this. Some things are better left buried. Like my father? Richard flinched. You have no idea what you're dealing with. The truth isn't what you think it is. Then tell me, what am I missing? He walked toward the elevator, then paused with his hand on the button. Ask yourself this, Daniel. If Thomas really died in that garage, if he really killed himself, then who's been watching you all these years? Who saved you on that bridge 15 years ago? Who sent you looking for answers now? My blood ran cold. How do you know about the bridge? Richard smiled, a cold, cruel smile that didn't reach his eyes. I know more than you think. And so does your mother. He pressed the button. Be careful. Daniel, you're not the only one who's been keeping secrets. The elevator doors closed, and he was gone. I stood in the empty penthouse, my mind racing. Richard knew about the bridge, about old Jack, about someone watching me. How? How could he possibly know? Unless my mother had told him about my visit, about the questions I asked, about the trunk in the attic, or unless Richard had his own sources, his own surveillance, his own reasons for keeping track of Thomas Mercer or whoever Thomas had become. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus. I need that location, I said when he answered. Old Jack, Thomas, whatever we're calling him. I need to find him tonight. I've got a lead. Shelter in Red Hook, run by a Catholic church. Witnesses say a man matching his description has been staying there for the past few days. Send me the address. Daniel, if you go there now, you might spook him again. He's already run twice. He won't run. Not this time. I grabbed my coat. He's been waiting for me to find him. I think he's been waiting for 35 years. What makes you so sure? I thought about Richard's words, the fear in his eyes, the question that had haunted me since that night on the bridge. Asterisk. Who's been watching you all these years? Asterisk. Because he's my father. I said. And it's time. We finally met. I didn't go to the shelter that night. As much as I wanted to find my father, I knew I needed the complete picture first. I needed to hear the truth from someone who had no reason to lie. Someone who had carried their guilt for 35 years and was ready to confess. I needed Elena Rodriguez. The next morning, I drove to Queens. Her address led me to a modest apartment building in Astoria, red brick, fire escapes clinging to the facade like metal vines, the kind of place where working-class people had lived for generations. I found her name on the buzzer. A. Rodriguez. APT. 4C. I pressed the button. Static. Then a woman's voice, tired, cautious. Who is it? My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm Thomas Mercer's son. Silence. Long enough that I thought she might not answer. Then the buzzer sounded. and the door clicked open. The hallway smelled like cooking oil and old carpet. I climbed 4 flights of stairs, my heart pounding harder with each step. When I reached 4C, the door was already cracked open, and I peered through the gap dark, wary, assessing. "You look like him," she said softly. "Just like him. May I come in?" The door opened wider, revealing a small woman in her early 70s. Elena Rodriguez had aged the way hard lives age people, deep lines around her eyes, gray hair pulled back in a practical bun, hands that had known decades of work. But her face held something else too. A heaviness. A burden she had been carrying for too long. "I knew you would come eventually," she said, leading me into a cramped living room filled with religious icons. A crucifix hung above the television. Candles flickered on a small altar in the corner. "I've been waiting 35 years for someone to ask. Then you know why I'm here." "Yes." She gestured for me to sit on a worn couch covered with a crocheted blanket. "You want to know the truth about your father. I want to know everything. About the accusation. About the money. About what really happened." Elena sat across from me in a rocking chair that creaked with every movement. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at the crucifix on the wall. "I was 25 when your mother hired me," she began. "Fresh from the Dominican Republic. No papers, no English, no options. Your family, they gave me a job, a place to live. I thought I was lucky. But you weren't. No." She shook her head slowly. Mrs. Mercer Victoria, she was not a kind woman. Cold, demanding, nothing was ever good enough. But Mr. Thomas, he was different. He treated me like a person. Asked about my family. Helped me with my English. Her voice softened. "He was a good man, Daniel. A truly good man." "Then why did you accuse him?" Elena's eyes filled with tears. She reached for a rosary on the side table, clutching the beads like a lifeline. "Because I was desperate. And because they made me believe I had no choice." She told me everything. It had started with her mother's illness. Cancer. The treatments were expensive, and Elena had no insurance, no savings, no way to pay. She had been working double shifts, selling her jewelry, sending every penny she earned back to the Dominican Republic. Then Richard came to her. "He knew about my situation," Elena said. "He had done research, found out about my mother, my immigration status, everything. He came to me one night, after your parents had gone to bed, and made me an offer. $50,000. Yes. $50,000 to say that Thomas had attacked me. To go to the police, give a statement, press charges." Her hands trembled on the rosary. "He said it would only be temporary, that Thomas would take a plea deal, serve a few months, and then it would all be over. He said no one would really get hurt. But you knew it was a lie." "Of course I knew." The tears spilled over, streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Thomas never touched me. He never even looked at me that way. But my mother was dying. Daniel, she was dying. And I couldn't save her without that money. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to hate this woman for what she had done to my father. But looking at her now, broken, repentant, consumed by guilt, I couldn't find the rage I expected." "What happened after you made the accusation?" "Everything fell apart." Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Thomas was arrested. The newspapers ran the story. Victoria filed for divorce. And Richard was always there, whispering in her ear, telling her what to do next. And my father? Did you see him again?" "Once." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The night before they said he died. He came to my apartment. I thought he was going to hurt me. I deserved it, after what I had done. But he just stood in my doorway and looked at me with those sad eyes." "What did he say?" Elena closed her eyes, and I could see her traveling back in time, reliving that moment. He said, "I know why you did it. I know about your mother. I don't blame you. Elena, you were just a pawn in their game." Then he gave me an envelope with money inside, $2,000 that he said he had saved. He told me to use it for my mother's medicine. I felt something crack inside my chest. Even at his lowest, even facing prison for a crime he didn't commit, my father had shown compassion to the woman who had destroyed his life. Did he say anything else? Yes. Elena opened her eyes and looked directly at me. He said, "Take care of my son. If you ever get the chance, watch over Daniel. Tell him his father loved him more than anything in the world." I couldn't speak. The words lodged in my throat like stones. I tried, Elena continued. After Thomas was gone, I tried to watch you. I would go to your school sometimes, just to see that you were okay. But Victoria caught me once. She threatened to have me deported, to tell the police I had lied about the accusation. So I stopped. She clutched the rosary tighter. I've prayed for you every day since then. Every single day. We sat in silence for a long moment. The candles flickered. Traffic hummed outside the window. The weight of 35 years of secrets pressed down on both of us. "There's something else," Elena said finally. "Something I've never told anyone." "What?" She stood and walked to a small cabinet near the altar. From a drawer, she pulled out a yellowed envelope. "Thomas gave me this the night he came to see me. He said to keep it safe, to give it to you when you were old enough to understand." She handed me the envelope, with trembling hands. I've been holding it for 35 years, waiting for this moment. The envelope was thick, heavy with whatever was inside. My name was written on the front in handwriting I didn't recognize but somehow knew. Asterisk. For Daniel. When he's ready. Asterisk. "I should have found you sooner," Elena said. "I should have told you the truth years ago. But I was afraid. Afraid of Victoria. Afraid of Richard. Afraid of what I had done." She fell to her knees, grabbing my hands. "Please. Daniel, please forgive me. I know I don't deserve it. But please, get up." I helped her to her feet. "You were a victim too. They used you, just like they used everyone else. But your father, my father, forgave you. That night in your doorway, he forgave you." I looked at the envelope in my hands. The least I can do is honor that. Elena wept openly, her whole body shaking with 35 years of released guilt. I held her awkwardly, this stranger who had been carrying a piece of my father's legacy without ever knowing what it meant. When she finally composed herself, I asked one more question. "The night Thomas supposedly died, were you questioned by the police?" "No. Richard handled everything. He said there was no need to involve me, that the case was closed, and you never saw Thomas again?" "After that night in your doorway?" Elena hesitated. A flicker of something crossed her face. Uncertainty, maybe, or recognition. "Once," she said slowly. "About 10 years later, I was at Mass, lighting a candle for my mother. She had finally passed by then, and I saw a man standing in the back of the church. Gray beard, worn coat. He was watching me. My heart stopped. Did he say anything? No. When I looked again, he was gone. I thought I had imagined it a ghost, maybe. My guilt playing tricks on me." She paused. "But now, seeing your face, I wonder if it was him. If Thomas was there that day, watching, still keeping his promise to look after the people he loved." I thanked Elena and left with the envelope clutched against my chest like a lifeline. Whatever was inside, it was the last piece of the puzzle. A message from my father, preserved for 35 years, waiting for me to find it. I didn't open it in the car. I didn't open it in the elevator. I waited until I was home, sitting in my study with the door locked, before I finally broke the seal. Inside was a letter and a photograph. The photograph showed a man I now recognized, Thomas Mercer, younger but unmistakable, standing next to another man I had never seen before. They were smiling, arms around each other's shoulders, clearly close friends. I turned the photo over. On the back, in my father's handwriting, asterisk, "Me and Henry. Brooklyn Bridge. 1988. The day we made our plan. Asterisk. Henry. Who was Henry? I unfolded the letter and began to read. Asterisk. My dearest Daniel. Asterisk. Asterisk. If you're reading this, then Elena has kept her promise, and you've finally found your way to the truth. I wish I could have told you myself. I wish I could have watched you grow up, been there for your first day of school, your graduation, your wedding. But some wishes aren't meant to come true. Asterisk. Asterisk. By now, you know what your mother and Richard did to me. You know about the false accusation, the conspiracy, the lies that destroyed our family. What you don't know is what happened next. Asterisk. Asterisk, I didn't die. On February 3rd, 1991. Asterisk. Asterisk. I was reborn. Asterisk. Asterisk. My friend Henry, the man in the photograph, was a paramedic. When I realized what Victoria and Richard were planning, I went to him for help. Together, we staged my suicide. A body from the morgue, a forged death certificate, a garage full of carefully placed evidence. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to fool Richard when he came looking. Asterisk. Asterisk. I know this sounds impossible. I know you must have 1,000 questions, but I need you to understand why I did it. Asterisk. Asterisk. I did it for you. Asterisk. Asterisk. If I had stayed, if I had fought the charges and gone to trial, the scandal would have followed you forever. You would have grown up as the son of an accused rapist, carrying my shame like a stone around your neck. I couldn't do that to you. I loved you too much. Asterisk. Asterisk. So I disappeared. I became someone else. And I watched you from a distance, praying every day that you would become the man I knew you could be. Asterisk. Asterisk. You did, Daniel. You became everything I hoped for, and more. Asterisk. Asterisk. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I'm sorry I let you believe I was dead. But I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. Not for a single moment. Asterisk. Asterisk. If you want to find me, go to Brooklyn Bridge, the spot where we used to watch the lights together, when you were too young to remember. I'll be waiting. Asterisk. Asterisk. Your father. Asterisk. Thomas. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put my head in my hands and cried. I didn't go to Brooklyn Bridge that night. I wanted to. God, how I wanted to. But there was something I needed to do first. Something that couldn't wait. I needed to confront my mother one last time. Maggie tried to stop me. She said I was too emotional, too raw, that I should wait until I had processed everything. But I couldn't wait. 35 years of lies were burning inside me. And if I didn't let them out, they would consume me whole. I drove to Greenwich at midnight. The house was dark, except for a single light in the upstairs window, my mother's bedroom. She was awake, waiting, perhaps. She must have known this was coming. I didn't bother with the doorbell. I still had my old key, never returned, never requested back. The lock turned smoothly, and I stepped into the foyer where I had taken my first steps, spoken my first words, learned my first lies. Victoria, my voice echoed through the empty house. Footsteps above me, then the creak of the stairs. She appeared at the top of the staircase in a silk robe, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. Without her makeup, without her careful composure, she looked old, fragile, human. Daniel. Her voice was steady, but I could see fear in her eyes. It's the middle of the night. I know what you did. She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't pretend to be confused. She simply walked down the stairs, one hand trailing along the banister, and stopped 3 steps from the bottom. Elena, she said. Elena. And this. I held up the letter, the photograph, from my father. The father you told me was dead. Victoria's face went white. Where did you get that? Does it matter? What matters is that I finally know the truth. All of it. I stepped closer, my voice rising. You framed him. You drove him to fake his own death. You stole 35 years of my life, years I could have spent with my father because you wanted to be with Richard. It wasn't that simple. It was exactly that simple. I was shouting now, decades of suppressed rage finally breaking free. You chose your affair over your family. You chose comfort over truth. You let me grow up believing my father was a monster, when the real monsters were sleeping in the bedroom down the hall. Victoria flinched as if I had struck her. Her hand gripped the banister so tightly, her knuckles went white. You don't understand, she whispered. You don't know what it was like. Then tell me. Make me understand. Explain to me how a mother could do this to her own child. She was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she sat down on the stairs, her silk robe pooling around her like spilled milk. I was 27 when I married Thomas, she began. Young, naive, in love with the idea of love but not really understanding what it meant. Thomas was kind, gentle, devoted, everything a husband should be, but kindness isn't passion. Gentleness isn't excitement. Thomas loved me more than I deserved, and I took him for granted. She looked at her hands. Richard was different, dangerous, thrilling. He made me feel alive in ways Thomas never could. So you had an affair? Yes. For 2 years, I lived a double life. Loving wife by day, Richard's mistress by night. Her voice was hollow, reciting facts without emotion. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was destroying everything Thomas had built for us, but I couldn't stop. I was addicted, and when Thomas found out, he begged me to end it. Begged me to choose our family over Richard. He said he would forgive me, that we could start over, that we could pretend it never happened. Victoria's eyes glistened, but I didn't want forgiveness. I wanted freedom. So you destroyed him instead. She nodded slowly. Richard came up with the plan. He said, if we could discredit Thomas, make him look like a criminal, the divorce would be easy. I would get full custody of you. And Thomas would be too ashamed to fight. And Elena was just collateral damage. She needed money. We needed a witness. It seemed clean. Victoria's voice cracked. I never thought he would kill himself. I never imagined he would. He didn't. I crouched down, forcing her to look at me. He faked his death. He's been alive this whole time, living on the streets, watching me from a distance because you made it impossible for him to be my father. Victoria's composure shattered. She stared at me with something between horror and disbelief. That's impossible. Richard found him. He saw the body. Richard saw what Thomas wanted him to see. A staged scene. A borrowed corpse. Enough evidence to close the case without asking too many questions. I stood up. My father outsmarted both of you. He survived, and he's been waiting 35 years for me to find him. No. Victoria shook her head frantically. No, this can't be true. Thomas is dead. He's been dead for. I've seen him, Mother. I've talked to him. I have his handwriting, his photograph, his explanation of everything. I held up the letter. He's alive, and you're going to have to live with that for the rest of your miserable life. Victoria began to cry, not the composed, dignified tears of a society woman, but ugly, racking sobs that shook her entire body. I watched without sympathy. After everything she had done, her tears meant nothing to me. I'm sorry, she gasped between sobs. Daniel, I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back the years I lost. Sorry doesn't erase the nightmares, the therapy, the suicide attempt. I let that last word hang in the air. Did you know about that? That I almost jumped off Brooklyn Bridge when I was 23? That I was so broken by the life you created for me that I wanted to die? Victoria looked up, her face streaked with tears and mascara. What? The breakdown, the depression, the months of darkness after I lost my job. I laughed bitterly. You didn't know. did you? You were too busy with your charity galas and your perfect husband to notice that your son was falling apart. I didn't, Daniel. I had no idea. Of course you didn't. You never saw me. Not really. I was just a prop in your perfect life, proof that you were a good mother, even though you weren't. I walked toward the door, but here's the irony. The father you erased? The man you framed and drove away? He was there that night, on the bridge. He saved my life. Victoria's face crumpled. Thomas saved you? Thomas has been saving me my entire life. From a distance, in silence, sacrificing everything so I could have a chance at happiness. I opened the door. That's what real love looks like. Mother, maybe you should take notes. Daniel, please. She stumbled to her feet, reaching for me. Please don't leave like this. We can talk. We can work through. There's nothing to work through. You made your choices 35 years ago. Now you have to live with them. I paused in the doorway. I'm going to find my father. I'm going to bring him home. And when I do, I'm going to make sure the whole world knows what you and Richard did to him. You'll destroy us. No. You destroyed yourselves. I'm just turning on the lights. I walked out into the cold November night, leaving my mother crying in the doorway of her empty mansion. The last thing I heard before I got in my car was her voice, broken and desperate. Daniel! Daniel! Please come back. Please. I didn't look back. I drove straight to Maggie's office. She was still there working late on a case, fueled by coffee and determination. When I walked in, she took one look at my face and stood up. What happened? I confronted my mother. Told her everything. I sat heavily in the chair across from her desk. She admitted to all of it. The affair, the conspiracy, the cover-up. Did she know Thomas was alive? No. That part genuinely shocked her. I think she really believed he died in that garage. I rubbed my face. Not that it matters. She still destroyed him. She still took him away from me. Maggie came around the desk and knelt in front of me. What do you want to do now? I want to find my father. Tonight. Right now. I pulled out the letter. He said he would be waiting at Brooklyn Bridge, the spot where we used to watch the lights. Then let's go. I looked at her, this woman who had married me despite my broken pieces, who had stood beside me through every revelation and confrontation. You don't have to come. It's personal. That's exactly why I'm coming. She took my hand. You've been alone in this darkness for too long, Daniel. You don't have to face it alone anymore. I pulled her into a hug, holding her tighter than I ever had before. Thank you, I whispered. For everything. Thank me later. She pulled back, grabbing her coat. Right now, we have a father to find. We drove to Brooklyn Bridge in silence. The city glittered around us, indifferent to the drama unfolding in one small car on its crowded streets. I thought about everything that had led to this moment, the lies, the revelations, the confrontations, and realized that my entire life had been building to tonight. The night I would finally meet my father, the real one. Not the ghost of a suicide victim, not the shadow of an accused rapist, but the man who had loved me enough to sacrifice everything and had spent 35 years waiting for me to find my way back to him. I parked near the bridge's pedestrian entrance, the same entrance I had used 15 years ago when I was 23 and broken and ready to die. Maggie squeezed my hand. Ready? No, I admitted. But I don't think I ever will be. We walked onto the bridge together. The bridge was different at night. During the day, it was a tourist attraction crowded with selfie sticks and bicycle bells, an iconic symbol of New York's grandeur. But at 2 a.m., with the wind howling through the cables and the city lights reflecting off the black water below, it felt like a cathedral, sacred, eternal, a place where lives changed forever. I knew exactly where to go. The spot was about halfway across, near one of the massive stone towers. There was a small alcove where pedestrians could step aside, look out at the water, catch their breath. 15 years ago, I had stood here with my hands gripping the railing, ready to let go. Tonight, Someone was already there. He stood with his back to us, wrapped in that same faded coat, his gray hair stirring in the wind. He was looking out at the Manhattan skyline, at the lights he had once promised to put in a jar for a little boy who didn't remember. Thomas. My voice came out as a whisper, swallowed by the wind. But he heard. I knew he heard, because his shoulders tensed, and his hands gripped the railing just a little tighter. Slowly, he turned around. In the dim light, I could see his face clearly for the first time. The gray beard couldn't hide the familiar jawline. The weathered skin couldn't mask the eyes, my eyes gray-blue and shimmering with unshed tears. Daniel. His voice cracked on my name. You came. Of course I came. I stepped closer, Maggie hanging back to give us space. I've been looking for you my whole life. I just didn't know it until now. We stood there, father and son, separated by 3 feet of concrete and 35 years of silence. Neither of us moved. Neither of us seemed to know what to do next. You read the letter. Then you know everything. I know what you told me. I know what Elena told me. I know what my mother confessed. I shook my head. But I still don't understand. Why didn't you come back? After the scandal died down. After everyone forgot. Why did you stay away? Thomas closed his eyes. When he opened them, I saw decades of pain reflected in their depths. Because I was afraid, he said simply. Afraid that coming back would ruin the life you had built. Afraid that you would hate me for abandoning you. Afraid that knowing the truth would hurt you more than the lies ever did. So you chose to suffer instead. 35 years on the streets, watching from a distance, never letting me know you were alive. It was better than the alternative, was it? I stepped closer, my voice rising. Do you know what it was like? Growing up without a father? Do you know what it felt like? Believing I came from a monster? I spent my entire childhood wondering what was wrong with me. What broken thing I had inherited from a man who would attack a defenseless woman. Daniel. I tried to kill myself. The words exploded out of me. Right here, on this bridge. 15 years ago, I was 23, and broken and convinced that the world would be better without me. And you, I jabbed a finger at his chest. You were there. You saved me. But you didn't tell me who you were. You let me walk away thinking a stranger had shown me more kindness than my own family ever had. Thomas was crying now. Tears streaming down his weathered face. I wanted to tell you, he whispered. That night, every fiber of my being wanted to say, I'm your father. I love you. Please don't jump. But I couldn't. You were so fragile, so broken. I was afraid the shock would push you over the edge instead of pulling you back. So you bought me coffee instead. You talked about pigeons and sunrises and finding reasons to live. I did what I could, what I thought would help. He reached out hesitantly, then let his hand fall. I've replayed that night 1,000 times, Daniel, wondering if I made the right choice, wondering if telling you the truth would have saved you faster or destroyed you completely. I didn't have an answer for that. The truth was, I didn't know either. Tell me, I said, my voice softer now. Tell me everything. From the beginning. I need to hear it from you. Thomas nodded slowly. He gestured toward a bench nearby, and we sat down together, father and son, reunited at last on the bridge, where everything had changed. And he told me his story. I fell in love with your mother the first time I saw her, Thomas began. Summer of 1984. She was wearing a yellow sundress, laughing at something her friend had said. She looked like sunshine given human form. He paused, lost in the memory. We married a year later. I thought I was the luckiest man in the world. Victoria was beautiful, intelligent, ambitious, everything I had ever dreamed of. And when you were born, his voice cracked. When you were born, I held you in my arms and cried. I promised you that I would always be there, that I would always protect you. But something went wrong. Yes, something I didn't see coming. Thomas stared at his hands. Richard had always been jealous of me. Growing up, I was the favorite, better grades, more friends, parents who doted on me while treating him like an afterthought. He resented me for it. And when I married Victoria, when I had you, that resentment turned into something darker. He wanted what you had. More than that, he wanted to take it from me, to prove that he was better, that he deserved the life I had built. Thomas shook his head. I didn't see it at first. Richard was charming, attentive, the perfect brother-in-law. He helped with the house, babysat when Victoria and I needed a night out. I trusted him completely. When did you find out about the affair? 2 years in. I came home early from a business trip and found them together in our bedroom. Thomas's jaw tightened. I wanted to kill him. I wanted to tear him apart with my bare hands. But Victoria was crying, begging me to forgive her, saying it was a mistake that would never happen again. And you believed her? I wanted to believe her. I had you to think about my son, my everything. I couldn't tear our family apart without at least trying to fix things. He laughed bitterly. So, I forgave her. I moved on. I pretended it never happened. But it happened again. Of course it did. The affair never really ended, they just got better at hiding it. For 2 more years, I lived in ignorance, working to provide for a family that was already broken. Thomas wiped his eyes. When I finally discovered the truth, when I found the hotel receipts, the love letters, the evidence of their ongoing betrayal, I confronted Victoria. I told her I wanted a divorce, and that's when they came up with the plan. Richard's plan, executed by Victoria. They knew I would fight for custody of you. They knew I would never let you go without a battle. So they decided to destroy me first. His voice hardened. Elena was just a tool, a desperate woman they could manipulate with money. The accusation was designed to break me, to make me so ashamed that I would walk away from everything, including you. But you didn't. No. I was innocent, and I was going to prove it. I hired a lawyer, gathered evidence, prepared to fight the charges. Thomas paused. That's when I realized how far they were willing to go. What do you mean? Richard came to see me the night before my arraignment. He said, if I didn't plead guilty and disappear, there would be consequences. He would make sure Victoria got everything, the house, the money, you, and if I tried to fight, he would make sure I spent the rest of my life in prison. Thomas's hands trembled. He had connections, Daniel, judges, prosecutors, people who owed him favors. I knew he could do it. So you staged your death instead. My friend Henry, the paramedic, he helped me see another way. If I was dead, I couldn't be a threat. Victoria and Richard would have what they wanted, and you would be free from the scandal. Thomas looked at me with those familiar gray-blue eyes. I know it sounds insane. I know it was the coward's way out. But in that moment, it felt like the only option that protected you. How did you do it? Henry had access to unclaimed bodies at the morgue. We found one that roughly matched my build, dressed it in my clothes, staged the scene in the garage. Richard found exactly what he expected to find his brother, dead by his own hand, with a suicide note that confirmed his guilt. And then you disappeared. I became someone else. Jack. Old Jack. A homeless man with no past and no future, living on the margins of a city that had forgotten him. Thomas smiled sadly. But I never forgot you. I never stopped watching. Every birthday, every graduation, every milestone I was there, hiding in the crowd, praying that you were happy. I thought about all the moments in my life when I had felt alone. The failures, the heartbreaks, the night on this very bridge when I had wanted to end it all. My father had been there for all of them. Why didn't you ever reach out? I asked. After I grew up, after I became successful, why didn't you come forward? Because by then, the lie had become your truth. You believed your father was dead. You had built a life around that belief. I was afraid that revealing myself would tear down everything you had accomplished. He reached out and took my hand the first time he had touched me in 35 years. I was wrong, Daniel. I know that now. I should have trusted you with the truth. I should have given you the choice. Instead, you saved me on a bridge and walked away. The hardest thing I've ever done. His grip tightened. I wanted to hold you. I wanted to tell you everything. But you were so broken that night, and I was so afraid of making things worse. So I did the only thing I could. I gave you a reason to keep living. And I prayed it would be enough. It was, I said quietly. It was enough. We sat in silence, holding hands, watching the lights of Manhattan shimmer across the water. 35 years of separation. And somehow this moment felt like no time had passed at all. What happens now? Thomas asked finally. I looked at my father, really looked at him, for the first time in my life. Now you come home, I said. We figure out the rest together. Thomas smiled, a real smile. One that reached his eyes. I'd like that, he said. I'd like that. Very much. Maggie appeared beside us, her eyes red with tears she had been trying to hide. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said. But Daniel, there's something you should know. She held up her phone. On the screen was a news alert. Asterisk, asterisk. Richard Mercer, prominent attorney, found dead in Greenwich home. Asterisk, asterisk. I stared at the headline, my mind refusing to process the words. What? It just happened. Police are calling it a heart attack. Maggie looked at me, then at Thomas. Your mother found him. She's at the hospital now. I looked at my father. Richard was dead. The man who had destroyed our family, who had stolen 35 years from us, he was gone. And with him, any chance of legal reckoning, but also any chance of further harm. The universe has a sense of timing, Thomas said quietly. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So I did both. Richard Mercer was buried on a gray Thursday afternoon. The funeral was held at the same church where he and Victoria had been married 33 years ago. The pews were filled with lawyers, politicians, business associates, the people Richard had cultivated like crops, harvesting favors and influence for decades. They spoke of his brilliance, his dedication, his legacy. None of them knew the truth. I attended with Maggie, sitting in the back row, watching my mother play the grieving widow. Victoria was dressed in black Chanel, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief, accepting condolences with practiced grace. She looked every inch the dignified widow, a woman who had lost her beloved husband to a sudden, tragic heart attack. I wondered how much of her grief was real. Richard had died the same night I confronted Victoria. The same night Thomas and I reunited on the bridge. The coroner ruled it a massive coronary, the kind that strikes without warning, killing a man before he hits the ground. Convenient timing, I thought. Almost too convenient, but I didn't dwell on it. Richard was gone. Whatever justice the universe owed my father, it had collected in its own way. After the service, Victoria approached me in the parking lot. Her eyes were red. Her makeup smudged, the first time I had ever seen her look less than perfect. Daniel. Her voice was hoarse. Thank you for coming. I didn't come for him. She flinched. I deserve that. Yes. You do. We stood in silence, the November wind cutting between us like a blade. I could see her struggling, wanting to say something, not knowing how. Is it true? She asked finally. What you said that night. Is Thomas really alive? I considered lying. Considered letting her spend the rest of her days wondering, haunted by uncertainty, the way my father had been haunted by exile. But I was done with lies. Yes. He's alive. He's been alive this whole time. Victoria's composure cracked. A sob escaped her throat, raw, ugly. Nothing like the dignified tears she had displayed at the funeral. Oh God. Thomas. After everything I did to him, he survived. No thanks to you. I need to see him. I need to explain. No. My voice was firm. You don't get to explain. You don't get to apologize. You made your choice 35 years ago, and now you have to live with it. But Daniel, Thomas doesn't want to see you. He told me himself. He's spent 35 years trying to forget what you did to him, and he's not going to let you tear open those wounds now. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You took everything from him, Mother. His reputation, his family, his entire life. The least you can do is give him peace. Victoria stared at me, tears streaming down her face. What about us? She whispered. You and me. Is there any chance we can? I don't know. It was the honest answer. Maybe, someday, but not now. I need time. We all do. I turned and walked away, leaving my mother standing alone in the parking lot of the church where she had married the man who destroyed my father. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure, but it was a beginning. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change. First, I brought Thomas home, not to my penthouse that felt too fast, too overwhelming for a man who had spent 35 years on the streets. Instead, I rented him an apartment in Brooklyn Heights, a modest one-bedroom with a view of the bridge, the same bridge where he had saved my life, the same bridge where we had finally found each other. The first night, I stayed with him until midnight, helping him unpack the few possessions he had accumulated over the years. A worn Bible, a photo album filled with newspaper clippings about me, a coffee mug from the diner where we had shared our first meal. You kept all this? I asked, flipping through the album. Every article, every mention. Thomas smiled. I may not have been in your life, Daniel, but you were always in mine. I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged him, my father, alive and real and finally within reach. It took time for us to find our rhythm. Thomas wasn't used to comfort, to stability, to having someone who cared whether he lived or died. Some days, I would visit and find him pacing the apartment like a caged animal, unused to having walls around him. Other days, he would sit by the window for hours, staring at the bridge, lost in memories I couldn't access. But slowly, day by day, he began to heal. I hired a therapist, the best in the city, someone who specialized in trauma and reintegration. Thomas was resistant at first, but eventually agreed to try. The sessions were difficult, dredging up decades of pain and loss. But they were also necessary. You can't rebuild a life on a foundation of buried wounds. Maggie was my rock through all of it. She handled the legal complexities, reinstating Thomas's identity, dealing with the death certificate that had erased him from existence. It turned out that coming back from the dead was a bureaucratic nightmare, but Maggie navigated it with her usual brilliance. Your father is officially alive again, she announced one evening, holding up a stack of documents. Social Security, driver's license, bank account, the whole package. Thank you. I kissed her. For everything. Thank me by cooking dinner for once. I'm exhausted. I laughed, the first genuine laugh I had managed in weeks. 3 months after Richard's funeral, I made a decision. I was going to tell the truth. All of it. Not to the police, Richard was dead. Victoria was a broken woman, and there was no justice to be found in a courtroom. But to the world, to the people who had believed the lies about my father, to anyone who might be living their own version of our nightmare, trapped in a web of family secrets and buried truths, I wrote an article, 10,000 words detailing everything, the affair, the conspiracy, the false accusation, the staged suicide, the 35 years of exile. I named names. I provided evidence. I held nothing back. Maggie read it first. This will destroy your mother, she said quietly. Whatever's left of her reputation, whatever peace she's found, this will take it all away. I know. Are you sure you want to do that? I thought about it. Really thought about it. No, I admitted, but I'm sure I need to do it. My father spent 35 years as a ghost, erased from existence by people who were supposed to love him. He deserves to have his name cleared. He deserves to have his story told. Maggie nodded slowly. Then publish it. I'll stand beside you, whatever happens. The article went live on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday, It had been picked up by every major news outlet in the country. By Thursday, reporters were camped outside my mother's house in Greenwich, demanding answers she couldn't give. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt empty. Justice, I realized, wasn't the same as healing. Exposing the truth didn't undo the damage. It didn't give my father back the 35 years he had lost. It didn't repair the broken pieces of my childhood. It was simply necessary. A debt that had to be paid. Victoria called me the day the article went viral. I almost didn't answer. Are you satisfied now? Her voice was cold, brittle. You've destroyed everything. The family name, my reputation, everything your father and I built. Everything you and Richard built on lies, I corrected. On the corpse of an innocent man's life. Silence. I'm leaving Greenwich, she said finally. Moving to Europe. I can't stay here anymore. That's probably for the best. Will I ever see you again? I considered the question. My mother, the woman who had raised me, lied to me, stolen my father from me. Did I want her in my life? Did I have room for her, alongside the man she had tried to destroy? I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe. Someday. But not now. I understand. A pause. For what it's worth, Daniel, I'm sorry. I know it doesn't mean anything. I know it doesn't change what I did. But I am sorry. Goodbye, Mother. I hung up before she could respond. Elena Rodriguez received her own form of reckoning. I visited her 2 weeks after the article was published. She had been following the news, she said, watching the story unfold with a mixture of horror and relief. Horror at seeing her role in the conspiracy exposed to the world. Relief at finally being free of the secret she had carried for 35 years. I should have come forward sooner, she said, clutching her rosary. I should have told the truth before it was too late. You told it when it mattered, I said. That's what counts. I gave her money enough to live comfortably for the rest of her life. She tried to refuse, saying she didn't deserve it after what she had done. But I insisted. My father forgave you that night in your doorway, I reminded her. He gave you his last $2,000 when he had nothing. Let me honor that. Let me finish what he started. Elena cried. She fell to her knees and thanked God for his mercy. And then she hugged me, this woman who had destroyed my father's life and spent 35 years atoning for it. You're a good man, Daniel, she whispered. Just like your father. It was the greatest compliment anyone had ever given me. The reckoning was complete. Richard was dead. Victoria was exiled. The truth was public. My father was free. But as I sat in Thomas's apartment that night, watching him sleep peacefully for the first time in decades, I realized that the reckoning wasn't really about justice or revenge. It was about reclaiming what had been stolen. My father's name, his dignity, his place in my life. All those years, I had been living with a phantom wound, the absence of a father I believed was dead. Now that wound was healing. Slowly, painfully, but healing nonetheless. I still had questions. I still had anger. I still had moments when the magnitude of what my mother had done threatened to overwhelm me. But I also had hope. Hope that the future could be different from the past. Hope that love could survive even 35 years of separation. Hope that the broken pieces of my family could be reassembled into something new, something true. I looked at my father, sleeping peacefully by the window, the lights of Brooklyn Bridge twinkling in the distance. We made it, I whispered. We finally made it, and for the first time in my life, I believed it. 1 year later, November 15th, the anniversary of the night I almost died and the night I was reborn. I stood on Brooklyn Bridge at 2:47 a.m., exactly where I had stood 16 years ago. The wind was cold. The city lights reflected off the black water below, and the world felt vast and indifferent and beautiful. But this time, I wasn't alone. Thomas stood beside me, his gray hair combed neatly, his worn coat replaced by a new one Maggie had bought him for his birthday. He looked healthier than I had ever seen him, still weathered by decades of hardship, but no longer broken. His eyes, those familiar gray-blue eyes, were clear and bright and full of something I had never seen in them before. Peace. 16 years, he said quietly. Hard to believe. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. He nodded, understanding without needing explanation. That was one of the gifts of the past year. We had learned to communicate in silences as much as words. Behind us, Maggie waited at a respectful distance, giving us space for this private ritual. She had offered to stay home, but I wanted her here. She was part of my story now, part of the family we were building together. I used to come here every year, I said. On this date, at this time, I would stand in this exact spot and thank the stranger who saved my life. And now I thank my father. I turned to face him. Thank you, Dad, for saving me, for watching over me, for never giving up, even when you had every reason to. Thomas's eyes glistened. In the past year, I had called him many things. Thomas, Jack, Father. But this was the first time I had called him Dad. You don't need to thank me, he said, his voice thick. You did something harder. You walked through 35 years of exile. He smiled that sad, beautiful smile I had come to love. It was worth it. Every moment, every cold night, every hungry day. He placed his hand on my shoulder, because it led to this, to you, to us. I pulled him into a hug. My father, my ghost, my savior, the man who had sacrificed everything for me and asked for nothing in return. When we finally separated, both of us were crying. But they were good tears, clean tears, the kind that wash away the past and make room for the future. We walked off the bridge together as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. Just like we had 16 years ago, except this time, we both knew who we were. This time, there were no secrets between us. This time, we were walking toward something instead of away from it. Maggie fell into step beside me, slipping her hand into mine. How do you feel? She asked. Free, I said. For the first time in my life, I feel completely free. She squeezed my hand. Good, because I have something to tell you. I looked at her. Something in her expression made my heart skip. What is it? She glanced at Thomas, then back at me. A smile spread across her face, the kind of smile that changes everything. I'm pregnant. The world stopped. What? 8 weeks. I found out yesterday, but I wanted to wait until tonight to tell you. It felt right telling you here, on the anniversary. She laughed nervously. Say something, Daniel. I couldn't speak. My mind was reeling, trying to process the magnitude of what she had just said. A child. My child. Our child. A new generation to carry forward everything we had fought for. I looked at Thomas. He was staring at Maggie with an expression of pure wonder. I'm going to be a grandfather? He whispered. Yes. Maggie's eyes were bright with tears. You're going to be a grandfather. Thomas laughed, a real laugh, full and joyful, the sound of a man who had finally found something worth celebrating. A grandfather, he repeated. After everything, a grandfather. I pulled Maggie into my arms and kissed her like the world was ending and beginning at the same time. Because in a way, it was. The old world, the world of lies and secrets and broken families, was ending, and a new world was beginning. A world where my child would know their grandfather, where the truth would be passed down through generations, where love would triumph over the darkness that had consumed us for so long. I don't know what to say. I managed when we finally broke apart. Say you're happy. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. I looked at my father, at my wife, at the bridge stretching behind us like a monument to everything we had survived. I'm complete. For the first time in my life, I'm complete. We had breakfast at Sal's 2 4-hour diner, the same diner where Thomas had bought me coffee with his last $5 16 years ago. The same cracked vinyl booths, The same burnt coffee, the same waitress named Dorothy, now gray-haired but still working the early shift. "Well, I'll be damned," she said when she saw Thomas. "Old Jack, haven't seen you in ages. I found my way home, Dorothy." Thomas smiled. "Finally found my way home." She looked at me, then at Maggie, then back at Thomas. "The kid from that night," she said slowly. "The one you bought coffee for. That was him? That was my son." Dorothy stared at us for a long moment. Then she shook her head and laughed. "Well, ain't that something? All those years, watching you come in here alone, and now." She gestured at our little family. "Coffee's on the house. The whole damn meal's on the house. We ate pancakes and eggs and bacon. Talking about everything and nothing. About baby names." Thomas suggested Eleanor, after his mother. "About nursery colors." Maggie wanted yellow, like sunshine. About the future stretching ahead of us, full of possibilities we never could have imagined. And as the sun rose over Brooklyn, streaming through the dirty windows of that old diner, I realized something. The bridge hadn't just been a place where I almost died. It had been a place where I was meant to be saved. Everything that had happened, the lies, the exile, the 35 years of separation had led to this moment. This table, this family, this second chance that neither my father nor I had ever dared to hope for. "What are you thinking about?" Thomas asked. "Chances," I said. "You told me once that as long as you're alive, there's a chance. A chance to make things right. A chance to find your way back." I remember. You were right. I looked at Maggie, at her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "All those years, you never stopped believing. And now we have everything," Thomas finished. "Everything, and more." We left the diner as the morning rush began, commuters flooding the streets, the city grinding into motion for another day. Thomas walked between Maggie and me. A man reborn at 65, ready to start a new chapter he never thought he would get to write. At the corner, he stopped and looked back at the bridge. "You know what I used to think about?" he said. "All those nights, sleeping under the bridge, watching the lights." "What?" "I used to think about the day you would cross it again. The day you would find me, and we would walk off it together." He turned to face me, his eyes shining. "I imagined it 1,000 times, but I never imagined it would be like this." "Like what?" "Like this." He gestured at Maggie, at the city, at the future waiting ahead of us, with a daughter-in-law I already love, with a grandchild on the way, with everything I lost given back to me 100-fold. "You deserve it, Dad. After everything you sacrificed." "No." He shook his head firmly. "I don't deserve it. None of us deserve the grace we're given. We just have to be grateful for it." He pulled me into one last hug, and I am grateful, Daniel, more grateful than words can say. We stood there for a long moment, father and son, holding each other in the middle of a busy Brooklyn sidewalk while the world rushed past us. People stared. People whispered. We didn't care. Let them stare, I thought. Let them see what love looks like when it survives the impossible. That night, I sat in my study with a blank page in front of me. For months, people had been asking me to write more, to expand the article into a book, to tell the full story of what had happened to my family. I had resisted, unsure whether I wanted to revisit the pain, uncertain whether there was anything left to say. But now, with my father sleeping peacefully in his apartment across the city, with my wife and unborn child resting in the next room, I finally knew what I wanted to write. Not a story of revenge, not a story of tragedy, a story of hope. I picked up my pen and began. Asterisk. The wind on Brooklyn Bridge that night was cold enough to kill, but I didn't care. I was 23, broken, and standing on the wrong side of the railing. Asterisk. Asterisk. That's when I felt a hand on my shoulder. Asterisk. Those nights. That's when I felt a hand on my shoulder. Asterisk. Not tonight, son. Asterisk.